Today, we begin at Hope Floats Healing and Wellness Center, where Erin Hourahan is a clinical social worker. Erin specializes in working with those who are experiencing grief and loss, infertility, and family stressors. Julie Thompson welcomed Erin via Zoom to learn more about what she does.
Erin, thank you so much for joining us today. I can't wait to talk to you. This is going to be really an interesting conversation. I know you work as an independent licensed social worker at Hope Floats Wellness Center in Kingston. Can you tell our audience a little bit about what that entails, what you do there, and what Hope Floats is?
Absolutely. So I am a licensed independent clinical social worker with a private practice here at Hope Floats. Although right now I'm virtual in my home because of this climate that we're in right now, doing telehealth with individuals, primarily focusing on folks dealing with grief and loss, as well as other mental health disorders like depression and anxiety. But Hope Floats Healing and Wellness is a wonderful facility in Kingston. It's a nonprofit, 501(c)(3) that helps folks with grief and loss through healing and wellness strategies. We provide free support groups for all forms of grief and different topics, as well as activities for wellness, such as yoga, Reiki, other types of, other wellness services. We also have an annual walk that unfortunately got delayed this year, but we're hoping to continue at some point. It's our biggest fundraiser. And we are also recently working to help people on the front lines, such as doctors, nurses, and other physical and mental health care providers, helping people in the community who are suffering with COVID-19. These people are essential in obviously helping heal our community. However, they need help too. And so we're working together with some of our co-workers at Hope Floats who are nurses and mental health professionals to create support groups for nurses and doctors right now who are on the front lines, who are managing so much stress related to all that they do every day for our community.
Right. Thank you. So Hope Floats generally, you deal with people who have all kinds of different emotional situations that they're in regular times, let alone what we're going through now. You talked to me a little bit before we went on the air about anticipatory grief.
Yeah.
I found that really fascinating. Can you talk about how we are all in this mode of anticipatory grief and what it means and what it looks like?
Right. So really our lives just became upside down a few months ago. And so really we are now in the process of managing this grief reaction we call anticipatory grief. And really it refers to a grief reaction that occurs before an impending loss. And really every day our world is changing and we're needing to figure out what life is going to look like. What's the new norm, if you will? And so there's a lot of loss right now that all of us are experiencing because we simply can't live our lives the way we were several months ago. And so that's why I correlate anticipatory grief with the acute stress of what's going on in our society right now.
And do people that tend to look at the world with a half glass full versus that half glass empty, are they able to handle this stress and this grief differently, or have the rules changed of this whole thing because of the situation we're in?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think that it's so individualized because we all have our strengths and weaknesses. And the other thing too is we've all, in some way, shape, or form, had grief in our life. And really, when we think of grief and loss, we're thinking about losing a loved one or someone that we cared about. But it also really can mean grieving the loss of our jobs or just our daily living, going out in the community, giving somebody a hug. These are all things that we're losing. But there are some people who are managing this a little better and then other people who are not. So it runs the gamut. But nonetheless, no one is impervious to this. Everyone is struggling with this to some capacity.
Right.
And so there there are strategies, luckily, for self-care here, but not everybody is, just flying free here. Everyone is having some sort of difficulty.
Right. And before we get into your actual strategies for self-care, which is really an important thing to talk about, human nature, the old phrase, hope springs eternal. That if you have something to hope for, or I'm doing that, I'm going to graduate in June, I'm going to get my first job, I'm going to get married, whatever it is, you always seem to have these little things that you're hoping towards, this next thing that you're hoping for. And with not knowing and not having that, we are tending to take all that stress internally, physically and emotionally. So how do you counsel people to first start with self-care, because if you can't help yourself, you can't help those around you? And then how would you counsel each of us to help our spouses, our children, our coworkers, or whoever's in our world?
Yeah, it's important to first remember that we as a society, and I'm sure our viewers could relate to the fact that they were revving very high. They were, living at a higher level. And a lot of people would agree that they were probably stressed or anxious or feeling really overwhelmed. And because our lives were really big. And now we have been asked to slow down immensely and to make our world much, much smaller. And so, because of that, we now need to have our expectations be smaller. So, the things that we were looking forward to in the future, if you think about it personally, they probably were a little bigger. They were maybe more lofty goals or more thorough goals. And so, really, the strategy there is to now scale it back a little bit and really make your goals smaller, because not everybody is going to be able to live the way they used to. So therefore, our goals and our objectives need to also match the new way we're living. And that's where people are having a really hard time, because their mentality is back to the way that they've always been living. And we've never lived this way before. And that's why people are really anxious.
Right. Yeah, we're hardwired to go a certain way. And you're right, we have been revving up and revving up and revving up, and everything was instantaneous, and all of a sudden it's not. And you had so many choices for anything you could do on any given night, and all of a sudden you can't. And those fences that are put up, some people react to better than others, I would say. And some people, can we just talk a little bit about anger and how people tend to get angry?
Yes. So I like to say anger's nickname is sadness. And when I tell people that, they really kind of find themselves surprised. But if you really think about it, anger is kind of what we call a surface emotion. And when we really delve into why someone is angry, it's usually because they're sad, because they're disappointed, or they feel like there's some sort of a loss. And so it makes sense that there would be anger right now.
And we see a lot of anger and a lot of polarization in our world, about so many things. So it comes down to how we can react to things and how we put ourselves out there and how we conduct our daily lives. So what advice do you give to each of us to live our best daily life while this is going on?
So basically, you want to think about what's in your control and what's out of your control. And that is a strategy that takes practice. And so once again, if you go back to the model of trying to think on a smaller scale, then adding what is in my control here on a smaller scale versus what is out of my control on a smaller scale, then that will help you, give you a better roadmap of kind of where to put your energy, because we're still learning of where to kind of focus our attention and to do what we are trying to figure out doing.
Right.
So if we know what's in our control and we go down that road, then that's where our energy goes and we'll get results. But if we bring our energy to things that we can't control, then we're going to find ourselves more frustrated and more angry, which really means that we feel kind of powerless.
Right.
So, but there are self-care strategies in between that we can also really utilize that might be helpful.
What can we do to recognize it in those around us, and how can we help the helpers? How can we help all the people in our lives?
Right. So basically, think about taking care of your body and then think about taking care of your mind. And so we can practice what we preach. And if we can practice the things that I'm about to express, as individuals, then we can help the greater good. We can help somebody else. Although sometimes it's easier to, help somebody else and then we feel better inadvertently, and that's another strategy. But basically, thinking about taking care of your body. Number one, we have to try to get enough sleep. A lot of people are talking about nightmares right now or having vivid dreams, and that's really the anticipatory anxiety that we're all experiencing, that our brains are kind of processing through the night. And hopefully that will calm down over time once we wrap our mind around what's going on, but really trying to rest. I'm a big believer in napping. So if you feel like you're needing a nap during the day, I say go for it, because that just means that your body needs some sleep. So do it. Also, participate in regular physical activity where you can. Go for a walk, be out in nature. That is an age old remedy that really does help almost everybody. Getting some good vitamin D is always a good thing, especially on a beautiful day like today. Luckily, we're heading into our summer months, and so hopefully that will help people too on a physical level. Eating healthy is always great. I know I talk to a lot of people, myself included, who were eating cookies like crazy and baking, and that was definitely something that I had my little run-in with. But hopefully we can keep, on the healthy track of eating. That might make, a difference. Avoid tobacco, alcohol, and drugs. Also limit your screen time. I know that's hard to do, especially when we're, on these virtual platforms nowadays, and we're getting a lot of our information on social media, but basically we just want to limit our screen time. Also, anything that you can do to relax and recharge, that's what you really need to try to focus on.
Wonderful.
So that's how we can help take care of our bodies.
Right.
But then taking care of our minds is usually the harder part.
Right.
So keeping our regular routine throughout this is something that is really vital here to helping our mind and just, our general psyche. So if it means that you get up every day around the same time you normally would and you get in the shower, then that's what you should continue to do. Something silly, but I make sure that I put shoes on every day. I'm at home, but I keep my shoes on because it makes me feel like I'm actually, I don't know, going to work.
Right.
And
Yeah, a lot
so
of people have said that they're because they're working from home a lot. They don't follow those same protocols, and they feel differently about themselves and their work. And
Yes.
it all makes sense. It really does. Can I
right.
ask
So
you-
oh,
Go ahead.
sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I forego the slippers and I just put my shoes on.
Good for you. And make your bed, those kind of things, like those traditional habits that kind of give a form to your life. It kind of gives you your guidelines to go by. What do you do if someone absolutely is lost in grief? And you must see this, and it must be difficult because you can't have them there physically with you, and you can't hold them, and you can't cry with them or hug them. How can you, as a counselor, and how can anybody that isn't trained like you recognize that and help support someone who seems to be absolutely lost in grief?
Right. So, in connecting with others is, really the sole purpose of us as human beings. And so, when it's difficult to build support and strengthen our relationships, that usually tends to fall right in line with grief and loss, particularly related to the loss of a loved one. And so, if we're noticing that somebody else that we care about is starting to exhibit symptoms, primarily of depression and anxiety related to loss, we want to look for the things that they're talking about related to just feeling, depressed and feeling down, and really concentrating on listening to the words that they are using, especially if they're talking, about possibly not being here themselves, if they're having what we call suicidal ideation or suicidal thoughts. That's a time when we really need to intervene and we need to get that person professional help.
Right.
If you, as an individual, are experiencing symptoms like that, then of course, it is imperative that you get yourself professional help. One way to do that, of course, is to contact your primary care physician and ask that they find you resources for utilizing therapy in the community. Finding someone like myself who has a private practice or works in a mental health clinic.
Right. You must get an awful lot of new clients, and that's probably a terrible way to put it, but there's so many people who need the services that you're offering. And I know lay people who aren't trained in what you do, you don't want to misread signs, and you don't want to not see signs. And can people just call and ask? Can they say, look, I have a loved one and this is what I'm seeing. What do you suggest I do? Can people do that?
Absolutely. I think that, another wonderful resource in the community, that's online is a forum called Psychology Today. And that's, of course, where you can find all types of therapy services in the community. And, you can contact any one of the people that are listed and you can have, almost like an intake session over the phone, because people might have never been to therapy before, especially nowadays with telehealth. It's different because it's virtual. It's not in person the way, it traditionally is. And that might really deter people. And you could argue that this is the most important time that people could utilize, a listening ear and an objective person to listen to what's going on for them and come up with those personal strategies to help them kind of process and figure out what to do for themselves.
Right. And to realize that there's no shame in asking for help. There's so many people who are so proud and they say, oh, I can figure this out. I can get through this myself. And it's okay, right? I mean, if we hear nothing else today, it's okay to ask for help, to say, I don't know how to do this, right?
Julie, yes. And if nothing else, the message today is that everybody experiences this. And I hate to say it in this way, but no one is impervious to loss. And so whether it be the loss of a loved one, the loss of a pet, the loss of a job, the loss of a home, it doesn't matter. All of us experience it. And so therefore we grieve and mourn the loss of what it is that we loved or cared about. Right. And so no one is going to not be touched by it. And most likely we're going to see the people that we care about also struggle with it. So what do we do about it when we see that?
And my last question to you is this grief and is loss and is everything that we're experiencing now, I know I've spoken to many people who think this is going to permanently change them and scar them and make them a different person. How do you speak to that whole mindset?
I hope that it changes us, but I hope that it changes us for the better because we are here to learn. I look at this like this is Earth School and we are here in school to learn. And so we're going to mess up. We're going to have struggles. This is hard work. And so when we figure out ways to help ourselves and we achieve the lessons we're supposed to learn, that's when we are successful. Right. And so let's take this time to kind of be successful in slowing down. Let's take this time to learn how to take care of ourselves, therefore in turn taking care of others, and be a more genuinely caring society. That's what we can learn right now.
And that can be our silver lining.
I hope so. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I feel that way too. But it's nice to hear it from a professional saying that because you're right. I can't thank you enough, Erin, for being with us today. This has been really wonderful. So Hope Floats, people can contact you through the website. I know that Hope Floats right now is offering some counseling without charge. Is that true?
So Hope Floats is made up of a myriad of mental health professionals like myself. And so we each have our own private practice there. And so you can go on to hopefloatswellness.org and you can click on all of the services that we have. And you can see all of the things that we have to offer. The groups are free. The majority of our activities are free. Therapy services can be, depending on the provider, on a sliding scale fee, and all of us take insurance.
Sure.
And luckily right now there is no co-pays right now because the governor has put that in place. So that's a lovely thing.
Yeah.
So if you want to reach out, of course, you go onto that website, give us a call, and we can, kind of gear you in the right direction. Unfortunately, right now, though, we are working, to continue with our groups, but on a virtual basis.
Sure.
So like everything else, we're doing our work through virtual platforms right now. But hopefully at some point soon, we can get back to seeing each other all in person.
Yes, and giving, instead of virtual hugs, giving real hugs to people.
Exactly.
Erin, thank you so much. This has been wonderful. Really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you for your time and thanks for having me on.
Okay. Elizabeth, I'll throw it back to you.
Thank you, Julie, and thank you, Erin, for being a helper and a source of healing for so many. And it is the helpers who give so much of their own physical and emotional energy to others that can use support also. Healing for the Helpers is a free virtual support group for nurses who help treat, care, and support patients and families impacted by COVID-19. Hope Floats Wellness Center is offering this group via Zoom to provide a safe space for caregivers to manage stress and navigate emotional responses related to moral and compassion fatigue. Sessions are on Thursdays from 5 to 6:15 p.m. Contact Denise at hopefloatswellness.org to register.